OTAs, they are back, baby. Organized team activities. They're also voluntary. So the guys don't actually have to be there. But one player who's not there, I'm a little surprised that a kicker isn't at OTAs, even though they're voluntary. So what's going on with Eddie Pinero? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me over on Twitter to get those questions in to me. Now, today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are back, baby. OTAs, organized team activities. They are here for the next 3 weeks, and it's going to be mandatory minicamp, then vacation for the Carolina Panthers as they prepare for the 2024 season. So next 3 weeks, 9 days, 9 practices. The Panthers are out on the field doing what exactly? Installs for the most part. We'll get into what exactly we can take from OTAs. I asked Josh Klein this yesterday, and while I understand what he had to say, also kind of an eye roll because, guys, they're not competing for jobs here. There's a lot of guys who aren't even there. They're voluntary. It ain't really that big of a deal. When it really starts to matter, that will be at the end of July and August. But cool, they're out on the field. I suppose it's something to talk about. Not really. No, they did give me something to talk about. Eddie Pinero, he ain't out there for OTAs. Wasn't out there last week or last month, rather, for voluntary minicamp. Eddie Pinero is also a kicker. I haven't heard very many times where the kicker didn't show up for voluntary minicamp, for OTAs, mandatory minicamp. I've not had that situation, I believe, occur here in Carolina, and now it's occurring with Eddy Pineiro, which made me kind of go, why isn't Eddy Pineiro around? Dave Canales has asked about Eddie's absence, and Dave had this to say: I think we're just focusing on the guys we have, which would make sense. I'm glad we have Harrison Mevis here so that we can actually go through our field goal and field goal block period. So just really focused on the guys who are here. And I'm sure Eddie, he's got a plan for this whole thing. And that is one thing that's important as they're going through primarily installs over the next 3 weeks. They would like to install some of the special teams like field goal kicking, field goal blocking, and hard to do that if you don't have a kicker. Now, the easiest way to look at this, too, is Harrison Mevis, while he is here trying to make the roster in Carolina, he could also basically just be a scab until Eddy Pineiro is ready to go. He's just filling a role the Panthers need. They were going to sign somebody off the street to kick for them so that they could go through these certain periods of time during practice. Right now, Eddy Pineiro is not out there for the Panthers. Now, I wonder why that is. And I guess some of the reporting suggests that this could be about his contract or lack thereof as far as the new contract he may want. Joe Person, the Athletic, pointed out that Pinero is the league's 21st highest paid kicker with an average annual value of $2.05 million. Mike K of the Charlotte Observer put this out there that Pinero is only due $150,000 in guaranteed money on his deal, which ends after this season. The Panthers would save $1.85 million if they moved on from Pinero. So there is an incentive for Harrison Mevis, at least for the team, for Mevis to win this job now, and they could move on from Pinero, who didn't have the best season last year after really being solid for Carolina after blowing, and it wasn't just him, DJ Moore as well, and the team as a whole, blowing that game in Atlanta. He was awesome, did not miss a kick the rest of the season. But last year, he had his ups and downs, only made 86.2% of his field goals, had a career low 85% extra point makes. That's not good enough in the NFL nowadays. As we've known, they backed up the extra point for a while. Now, looking at Harrison Mevis at Mizzou, really good. Had the longest field goal kick in SEC history last year, 61 yards to walk off against Kansas State. But career-wise, he had 103 kicking attempts. That's a lot. I looked at Pineiro when he was at Florida. He had 43. He had a better percentage in those 43 than what Mevis had in his 103. Mevis made 83.5% of his kicks in college, and in the NFL, that's not going to do it. But he does have a bigger leg. So you do wonder, having seen in the past some questionable decisions from the Panthers coaching staffs where it would have made sense go put Pineiro out there for a 54-yarder, and they decided not to do it, whether it was because of the wind or just didn't feel like Pineiro had the leg for it. To have a kicker who now certainly has the leg, maybe not the accuracy right now that's needed. And on Monday at OTAs, apparently he made all 5 of his kicks. Don't know how far those kicks were, but he made all 5 of them. Whatever pressure-packed conditions he was under, that being Harrison Mevis on Monday, he made all 5 of those kicking attempts. There will be a competition, I would imagine, once training camp gets underway in July and really in August as well, between Pineiro, I'm assuming he stays in Carolina, and Harrison Mevis, who I would imagine would stay along through the rest of OTAs, with especially if Pineiro's not going to be here, and also during mandatory minicamp, which that would be the time to wonder whether Eddie would be around. The last player who had any sort of, I guess, notoriety that wasn't around during this period of time was Robbie Anderson. Because of coming off a bad season, you thought he'd been around, wasn't around, but he did show up for mandatory minicamp when he actually had to be there. But when he wasn't around, he was still working out. And according to Johnny Hecker, who spoke to Joe Person of The Athletic, Eddie's doing his own workouts down back home in Florida. His brother, who is a kicker as well, he's working with him as he's heading into his senior year to make sure he's in the right spot, and he's continuing to train. It's not like Pineiro's just sitting around by the pool eating ho-hos. He's obviously going to be working out. He's going to be making sure that he's prepared for the opportunity ahead of him here in Carolina. If it's not going to be in Carolina, ahead of him elsewhere. And this is a different situation than a couple of years ago, where obviously the Panthers drafted Harrison Butker and they were bringing back Graham Gano. And there's a lot of fans to this day that are upset that Harrison Butker did not stay in Carolina, as he's been an outstanding kicker. We're not going to really talk about what he did off the field, and I'm sure plenty of people disagreed with it and plenty of people agree with it. It's America. Feel however you want about that. But as far as the player on the field, he's been phenomenal for Kansas City, and things have worked out far better for him having been a Chief than had he been a Carolina Panther, because he has 3 Super Bowl rings. But the Panthers at that point in time, when you look at Graham Gano, and I know that people love the revisionist history when it comes to this, Gano is a good kicker, and he has maintained to be a good kicker once he has been healthy. His health was the main problem for him in his last couple of years in Carolina, but that season he was a good kicker for Carolina. And the thing about it is, the Panthers were a team that were believing that they were going to be a playoff type of team. You're not going to be putting your kicking on a rookie. As good as Butker has ended up being, he lost a job to Gano. Now, this is a little bit different situation where, yes, you have a veteran in Pineiro who is a solid kicker. He's made 89% of his career field goals. That's pretty damn good. And he's coming off of, yes, what was a down year, but he's had the ups and downs. It's been really one year followed by one good year followed by a bad year to a good year to a bad year. So based off of that yo-yo, the yo should yo this year to the upward trajectory of him having a good season, and that not being the case as far as him struggling like he did last season. But the Panthers aren't a team that are going to be competing for anything this year, in my opinion, and the opinions of really anybody who's being sensible about what this team is and where they're at, and looking at all the moves that they made and the contract links of some of these guys. Every single offseason feels like this team is trying to compete for the NFC South, or trying to compete for whatever playoff position they think they can get. This year, I didn't get the sense that that's what they were trying to do. They were going to fill certain holes, obviously, but it was more about building the foundation and getting the football right more than it was you have to win right now. Having a long-term approach, which is not something that we have typically seen over the course of the last 5-6 off seasons here in Carolina. Long-term, Harrison Mevis may be the best kicker for you. If you're concerned about Pineiro's ability to kick from 50 plus accurately and consistently, and even just get it there to threaten, why not have Harrison Mevis potentially be your guy if it's close at all? Take the younger guy, take the guy who's more inexpensive than the player who's expensive, I guess costs more, and it has not been around all off season. So Mevis has an opportunity right now to take this job, to really put the pressure on Pineiro. And it's something that Dave Canales said. He likes to bring in some young guys, push the veterans to have that competition, and competition is a good thing. Iron sharpens iron. We've heard that all before. This may be a situation where Mevis has an opportunity to win this team over and also win the job as a kicker and be on the roster just based off of Pineiro not being around, whether it's contract related or there's other things going on. I don't know, but it's voluntary, emphasis on the voluntary. But if Pineiro's not around, Harrison Mevis is, and it's an opportunity for the thicker kicker to make the job here in Carolina. So that's going on in OTAs. What else is going on? What can be taken away from this period of organized team activities? We'll tell you here about that in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time Text Network out of buying NFL tickets. And I have a lot of people asking me, what's going on with Germany? What's going on with those ticket sales? I am not 100% sure, but I do know that if you make the flight over to Germany and you don't buy your tickets before you get there, it would be risky, but you could always go to Game Time and they can give you some great deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concert, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So what exactly can be taken away from OTAs, organized team activities? They're voluntary. Eddy Pineiro is not the only player that was not out there on Monday. Robert Hunt, he was not available. Jadeveon Clowney, who was there last month for voluntary minicamp, was not around on Monday. Could be there later on this week and in the weeks to come, but he was not there for the voluntary session on Monday. Eddy Pineiro went over that. Caleb on Chason, he wasn't there. Mike Strawn, Josie Jewell, David Moore, Cam Sims, Ashawn Robinson. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 starters who weren't there on Monday. So when you don't have 5 of your players who are expected to play a lot of snaps for you, what are you really getting out of all of this? What can fans really sink their teeth in and care about when it comes to OTAs? Personally, for me, it doesn't mean that much at all. There are some parts of it that matter. And talking to Josh Klein of the Wright Report yesterday, he says that he likes to see the guys if they belong. Like looking at an Xavier Liggett. I had a conversation with somebody, and it is Liggett, not Liggett, Liggett. So looking at Xavier Liggett and seeing that he belongs. And that person believes that he belongs. Okay, that's great to see if those guys belong. But they're also not in pads. They're also not competing for jobs right now. They're just trying to understand the offense and the defense and special teams, what all is going on. Now, this is what Dave Canales had to say about it when he was asked just about the rookies and getting them up to speed and just the team as a whole. He talked about they have 9 different installs, in particular on offense, and that they go through the 9 installs 3 different times during the offseason. So during phase 1 of the offseason, it's mainly classroom time, very little on the field. That's before they even get the rookies in-house, by the way. Phase 2 is practicing more on-field the plays with that install. Then phase 3, which is OTAs, each day, there's going to be 9 of them. They're going to hit an install on each day. So they went through their first install today. They go through the second one, the third one later on this week. The next week, they'll have them the next week. And then at the end of it, mandatory minicamp, it's kind of a final exam of all the installs that they've gone through 3 separate times throughout the offseason. And then after that will be the break. They'll come back to training camp and they'll begin to do installs once again. And then you can really start the competition as they have joint practices. I assume they'll probably do. And in the preseason games, that's where really the nitty gritty gets done of who's going to make the roster, who's going to be wide receiver 2 or 3, who's going to be yada, yada, yada position. Like right now, that's not really happening. It's just getting everybody on the same page, understanding the pace of the practices, which is what orientation, also known as rookie minicamp, was a couple weeks ago. And it's kind of a pseudo orientation for everybody else on the roster right now who's taking part in this voluntary OTAs as they try to understand what this offense is going to look like and what Dave Canales wants out of this team this year. And I'm assuming the same case defensively as Jerry Rivera and his coaching staff are going back over the same principles that they went over last year, and even Perry taking it to a next step forward, really just working on the fundamentals. That's the number one thing. And there's 2 things, fundamentals and then injuries, hoping that no one goes down with any sort of significant injury during this period of time. Those are the only 2 things that I am really paying attention to. and going to take that much to heart at this point in time in the offseason. As the coach is telling you, it's about installs. It's not even about competition. It's not even about some of those other spots. It is good to have competition, but the competition is really going to start in July. It's not really happening right now. And the fundamentals, as far as it goes with Bryce Young, that is what to watch for with this team. It's how his footwork is being developed. As last year, we found out in that reporting from Joe Person and Diana Rossini of The Athletic that this coaching staff that they had back in the past with Frank Reich and with Josh McCown, with Thomas Brown, they were not focused on the fundamentals, the footwork when it came to Bryce Young. Their focus was on him learning the playbook and being ready to go week one. Even though he may have been mentally ready to go, was he physically, in terms of his footwork, ready to go? And we saw where he struggled accuracy-wise, only 59% of his completions. So we did not see a ton of deep balls, and it has to do with protection, the inability of his receivers to get open, but still when they were available. And I remember multiple times where Mingo was open. I think a game against the Rollins down in the Dome, also week one against the Falcons as well. Missed on those plays. And those are plays that you would hope he's not going to miss on moving forward, and has people questioning his accuracy. Dave Canales had this to say about Bryce Young's accuracy and his footwork and fundamentals on Monday, saying deep ball, short, intermediate. He's really an accurate passer. One of the things that I love is I can really focus in on his footwork and his base and the mechanics of where his eyes are at when I know the ball is hitting receivers. So for the last couple of weeks, as we've been throwing on air, I don't have to worry about where the ball's going. That is what matters right now. The fundamentals, getting the football right, something that Dave Canales has said multiple times so far this offseason. We have talked about how this offseason is about helping out Bryce Young, getting playmakers around him. I feel like they've done that, trading for Deontay Johnson. They brought in offensive lineman and Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis to help out there with the run game and to protect up the middle, going towards the Drew Brees strategy that the Saints implemented, having a smaller quarterback back in the past as well, like we have here now in Carolina. They went out and got Leggett. It's going to be tough to rework my brain to say his name correctly. They got Jonathan Brooks, Jatavion Sanders. They have done everything they can reasonably, in my opinion, to put enough weapons around Bryce Young. So now you got to work on his footwork and make sure that Bryce Young, the player and the man, is ready to go and can do his part, do his 111th, as Dave has said in the past. That is really the focus, fundamentals, and staying healthy. I saw reports about how Ian Thomas was out there cooking. He had a big day. That's great. On May 20th, happy Mech Deck Day, by the way, Ian Thomas was playing well. Last year, had 5 receptions, 56 yards. We have 6 years of empirical evidence that shows us that Ian Thomas is just the run-of-the-mill blocking tight end in the NFL. I don't care what he's doing against air or what he's doing against defensive players not wearing pads in late May. We know who Ian Thomas is. That's not the thing to get focused on in the social media clips they put out there. Hearing about the fundamentals, the mechanics, the footwork that they're working with with the quarterback, Bryce Young, that's what you should be focused on. Now, it's not as fun, but not like anything fun's happening right now anyways. So there's just my thoughts on really what you can take away from OTAs. Largely nothing, but there is a tiny bit of something you can take away from it. And, well, there you go. J.C. Horn, he spoke to the media on Monday, and that was good to hear about his new approach to trying to stay healthy this season, and a couple of injury updates when it pertains to a couple of edge rush here in Carolina. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. The NBA Conference Finals are set. The Dallas Mavericks, PJ Washington, our old friend, him and Luka and Kyrie are going to face off against Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves, who were able to unseat the champs in Game 7 on Sunday night. Then looking over in the Eastern Conference, you have the Boston Celtics facing off against the Indiana Pacers. I don't know if the NBA is going to be loving the markets that are still available, but it should be fun. Conference finals time. Also, conference finals going on with the Stanley Cup playoffs in the NHL right now. New customers, that could be you, get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So J.C. Horn spoke to the media on Monday, the first time that we have heard from J.C. since having his fifth-year option exercise. He talked about how he was humbled and really appreciated the vote of confidence the Carolina Panthers gave him, and it is a big one. As Carolina, I talked about it, right, wrong, or indifferent. You could have argued either way, whether they decided to not do it where they decided to do it, which is what they did decide to do, was exercise the fifth-year option. You could have made a compelling case for why that was the right decision. And I don't really know if you could have made that compelling case of why that was the wrong decision. As far as it being the right decision, the Panthers potentially, if JC is able to stay healthy and plays at the kind of level that we all believe he can play at, and he was asked about, fans believe that when he's healthy, he can be a good player. He's like, I don't need fans to give me that kind of a reassurance. I already know that in my own right. And it's obvious to anybody. It doesn't really matter the opinions of B or fans, anybody else. Everyone knows that JC Horn, when he's out there healthy, is a damn good player. It's just unfortunate that he has not been able to be healthy his first 3 seasons. Now, the Panthers, if he is able to maintain that health, they're going to save a decent amount of money by deciding to exercise. Had they not exercised fifth-year option, then they had to go down the fifth-year option route, and who knows how that would have worked out, as we have seen. That's been a little tricky lately when it comes to former first-round picks. This was one where I can still understand the arguments against, but the argument for, I can understand it right now. But JC's got to stay healthy. He was asked about kind of what he's done so far this offseason. He's gone back to more of a college approach where he's lifting heavy weights more. He's not focused on, I guess, just like running and the conditioning. He's more focused on just lifting weights, getting stronger, getting back to that kind of body that he had, opposed to what he's done the last couple of years where he's decided that has not worked for me. And he did mention around this time last year, going into mandatory minicamp, so a couple weeks after this time around this time last year, he we saw about it's been a lot of soft tissue stuff. And then we saw again, he had an injury, missed mandatory minicamp, and then last with the hamstring week 1. So hopefully it works out for JC. I would hope for him, his own sake, obviously for the Carolina Panthers' sake. It's unfortunate to have that kind of talent and to show it, and then to not be able to show it as much as he's been able to show so far during his time at Carolina. So he's stepping up as a leader, rebuilt defense. Sad to see all those guys go, but he understands his business, and he's got to take care of his business this fall. Carolina is going to have a defense that can play at the levels or maybe improve from the levels that they played at last year in 2023. Again, the absences: Robert Hunt, Jadeveon Clowney, Eddy Pineiro, Caleb Chason, Mike Strawn, Josie Jewell, David Moore, Cam Sims, A'Shawn Robinson. Now, like guys like Mike Strawn and David Moore and Cam Sims, don't know why they wouldn't be out there, as they are, could be injuries. Caleb Chason, he missed last time when they had a voluntary minicamp because of injury as well. So unless those guys are injured, don't know why these back of the roster dudes wouldn't be out there. But again, it's voluntary. A couple of injury updates. Mari Barno hurt his knee at the end of last season. We hadn't heard anything about it until now. Apparently, he suffered a torn ACL. That's why he's been sidelined in practice. Knowing what happened with Austin Corbett last year, the year prior, rather, in 2022, when he tore his ACL, I would not expect to have a Mari Barno for a while. And that may be something where he could struggle to make the roster and they may just waive him due to injury. That's tough for him to not be out there. And there's opportunities for a couple of guys to step up and be seen, especially with Clowney not out there. And you would have thought that Barno's one of them. But now DJ Johnson, he's going to be the top available guy because DJ Woodham's also not out there, and you didn't have Caleb Chason. So just from what I'm looking at the roster, DJ Johnson, Eku Leota, Luigi Villan, and Cam Gill were the 4 guys available at the outside linebacker spots during OTAs on Monday, and possibly moving forward if Clowney is not going to hang around and be there for OTAs, and with obviously Barno sidelined and then Chason was not available. He's also been injured. Another player who we need to monitor this injury. And I had a conversation with somebody over the weekend about this person's status, DJ Woodham. Not the best news to report here. This person was telling me that Woodham is not really that close. And this could be a situation where I'm not saying he's going to stay. They told me they're not saying he's going to start off on PUP, physically unable to perform list, heading to training camp, but he's going to be behind. He may not be ready to go immediately once training camp goes. And that's just something to tell y'all. We already knew, the coaching staff already come out and said, it was either the coaching staff or Dan Morgan had already come out and said that he was going to miss OTAs and he was going to miss mandatory minicamp just because he's out there. He's just not out there. But that's something to monitor, as I've been told that he's probably going to miss some time even once training camp begins. We'll see how much time that is. Just want to let y'all know that. So that's not great news to the Panthers edge rushers. You get rid of Brian Burns, you're bringing Clowney, you're bringing Woodham. Barno comes back. He's already injured. Woodham's injured right now. He's going to miss the vast majority of the offseason. He's going to miss all of the offseason, it appears. And then you're going to get to the point also where you don't kill on Jason's out there for some injury concerns. That is a unit that I already have my concerns about, but certainly far more concerns just knowing the injury status of some of those guys right now, late in May. Doesn't matter that much now, but some of those are pretty significant. Obviously, an ACL is significant, and the tear that one of them suffered with will also significant. We'll see how that plays out as we get closer to the season actually starting and mattering once we get to the end of July and the beginning of August. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. We're on Fridays throughout the offseason right here, answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me over on Twitter to get those questions into me now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always and forever. Keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday.